Good evening. My name is Father Mark. I'm one of the Dominican chaplains at St. Benedict's, filling in for Father Mark today. So you have one Father Mark for another. You could tell him who's better. In 1987, an artist named Andres Serrano caused outrage in New York and throughout the world when he displayed a photograph of the crucified Lord in a tank of urine. Many people took offense to this because it mocked the crucifixion, and rightfully so. Such sacrilege. Still others thought that the controversy that it caused was a sign that it was a work of art. When he was asked about why he produced this photograph, Mr. Serrano explained that he did not intend to be offensive or cause controversy. He said that it was meant to be a serious work of Christian art and a critique of the way the crucifixion is often displayed without any of the sense of agony that Jesus experienced. In an interview, he said, what it symbolizes, quote, what it symbolizes is the way that Christ died. Blood came out of him. And maybe if the photograph offends you, it's because it gives some sense of what the crucifixion actually was like. Now, whatever anyone's opinion on the photograph may be, I think there's a small sliver of truth, very small sliver of truth, in Mr. Serrano's words. Jesus' crucifixion is horrible. It's far worse than we can imagine. And thankfully, none of us have seen a crucifixion. And it's hard to imagine a way of dying that can be worse. No artwork, no matter how skillfully painted or sculpted, can even come close to depicting just how cruel and terrible a death that Jesus suffered and died. However, the people to whom Jesus is speaking to in today's gospel knew very well what a crucifixion was. They had all seen it. It was a common practice for the Roman Empire to crucify criminals and sometimes leave their mangled bodies hanging on the cross for days. Those tortured, mangled bodies, naked, not with a shred of clothing, but completely naked, the person humiliated, would take place on busy streets leading into town so that no one going from place to place could walk by without seeing it. The Romans did this for a purpose, to create an atmosphere of fear. They wanted everyone to know that if they failed to comply with Roman rule, the same thing could happen to them. So when Jesus tells his disciples today in the gospel, take up your cross, it was shocking. It was disturbing. It was frightening. It would be like saying, if you want to be my disciple, you need to sit in the electric chair. If you want to be my disciple, you got to put a noose around your neck and be hung. That is how they understood Jesus' words. We have a crucifix on display here in the church. Many of us have crosses or crucifixes around our necks and probably have crucifixes in our homes. Why? Because Jesus has transformed the meaning of the cross. It used to be a means of intimidation and death, but now, because Jesus carried his cross and gave his life on it out of love, it means salvation. It means the promise of everlasting life. After Jesus rose from the dead, the cross became a symbol, not of defeat, but a victory for his disciples. They proudly displayed the cross in a way that they were mocking the Roman authorities, telling them that they were no longer afraid of them. Yes, the Romans could torture and kill their bodies on the cross, but God the Father would raise them up again. And so during the first centuries of Christianity, many people followed Jesus' example and were crucified in the faith. This includes St. Peter, who was crucified upside down. All the way through the centuries, the martyrs of Korea and Vietnam and Japan. They were no longer afraid because by rising from the dead, Jesus Christ conquered death. The same is true for us today. All over the world, Christians are standing up to oppressive regimes for the sake of the church and for Christ's people. They are refusing to deny their faith, even under threat of being tortured and put to death. One such person is Bishop Ronaldo Alvarez. He's been a vocal critic of the human rights abuses with the Nicaraguan government. So much so that he was jailed and is in jail right now. The government offered to release him if he would leave the country and go into exile. But he said no, because he could not leave his people behind. He is an example of someone who has chosen to pick up his cross and to follow Jesus Christ. Now, when we're talking about carrying our cross, we often mean those difficult circumstances in which we have no control. It might be an illness, a troubled marriage, or it might be a job that is not fulfilling, or strained relations within families. These are true crosses that cause real suffering. When they are unavoidable, though, we know that they can become for us a source of growth if we embrace them with patience. They could lead us to salvation if we lovingly accept them with Christ. In our own cross, Christ is with us. We are with the crucified one who was raised from the dead. There's a deeper meaning to the cross. It is that suffering that inevitably comes when we live the teachings of Jesus fully and without compromise will indeed come. It is the suffering of Bishop Alvarez that is experiencing right now in jail. It's the harassment and the attacks of so many pro-life demonstrators they endure as they protest in front of abortion clinics. It's the death threats that many people receive when they stand up for human rights violations. Many avoid picking up these crosses because of the cost of bearing them is high. But when people of faith and courage do, liberation follows. We discover that the elite rulers of the world, the powerful, are not powerful as they think. When we no longer give in to intimidation tactics, their influences, their power crumbles. And that is precisely what Jesus showed us by dying on the cross. That is what Christians need to do today if we're going to free the world of ongoing tyranny and evil. In today's second reading, St. Paul challenges us, each and every one of us, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. Do not be conformed by this age. Jesus offered his body on the cross as a living sacrifice, which has opened the way of salvation and eternal life for all of us. He offers his body, blood, and soul divinity today at Mass to be our nourishment on this most holy altar. if we follow his example by picking up our crosses, no matter how humiliating and terrifying, maybe then our salvation will not just be a future event waiting for us in heaven. It will be a reality today, freeing us from the power of sin and the fear of death.